Okay, now we're to the final one. This is the last one of God. Does God have a big toe? This one starts out talking about Moses. God needed a Jew who knew about freedom to get people free, and Moses was the only free Jew. Really, that was the main reason God picked Moses. Moses had never been a slave and had lived his whole life as a prince in the palace of the Pharaoh. There was, however, one problem in picking Moses. Moses knew that he was free, but he didn't know that he was Jewish. Nobody was Jewish in Pharaoh's palace, and Moses was in the palace. Moses' mother did her best to teach Moses that he was Jewish, but after the Pharaoh's daughter found Moses floating on the Nile River, she sent for a nursemaid to take care of him. And when he was very little, the nursemaid turned out to be Moses' real mother. She would sing Moses lullabies like Allah, Allah, bulala, Allah, Ula, Kezabib. She would tell Moses stories about Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, about Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah. She would light the Shabbat candles on Friday night and make chicken soup. But Moses was just a baby then, and soon his mother was taken away. Years later, when Moses was a grown man, he liked to take walks at night outside the palace, and he would dress up like a common person and go walking among the people. One night, he wandered into the neighborhood where the Jewish slaves were. Moses just happened to pass by the hut of a Jewish slave family who were lighting a Shabbat lamp with the little oil they had in their little house. Moses didn't understand what they were doing, but the light seemed familiar to him. He remembered the light from somewhere in his past, but he couldn't remember where. Next night, during his evening walk, Moses overheard a Jewish woman telling her children stories about people called Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah. The stories sounded familiar to him, but he was not sure where he'd heard them before. When the mommy was done with the story, she sang her lullaby to her children. Abba, Allah, ulala, Allah, ketaza. The song was in Moses' heart. He knew that song, but he couldn't remember who had first sung it to him. On the third night, Moses tried to avoid Jews on his walk. He went into the straw fields and he smelled the smell that pulled him along. Following the smell, he came to the house of a Jewish slave family where the mother was making chicken soup. Moses took a deep smell and then he screamed out, "My God, this is chicken soup. This is the stuff my mother made for me when I was a little kid. I must be a Jew too." That night, back at the palace, Moses still looked like an Egyptian, but he felt like a Jew. That night, God knew everything would be all right. And so that night, God lit up the burning bush and waited for Moses. Watching the burning bush burn. When God set out to pick a leader for the children of Israel, the most important quality God looked for was for patience. God wanted somebody who would not give up no matter how bad things looked, no matter how much people complained, no matter how long it took to get to the land of Israel. God wanted a patient person to be the leader, so God set out to make a patience test so that could be used to find the right person for the job. Now, the angels were always bothering God with ideas, and most of them were not very good. But God was patient, so he listened to all the angels' ideas for a patience test. Gabriel came forward with a tangled ball of string. Whoever has the patience to untangle this ball of string is the person for sure. God didn't much like this test because untying knots is just boring work. And string untanglers usually are the kind of people who save rubber bands, and that was not at all what God had in mind. Then Michael, the angel, flew forward with a little puzzle box. You had to twist it so that all of the red squares were on one side and all of the greens were on another and all the blues were on another and all the yellows were on another. Michael said, "This is a great patience test. You have to figure out how to get all the same color on all the same sides. I am still working on this one, so any person who can solve this is our person for sure." God sent Michael away after explaining that you didn't need patience to solve puzzles as much as you needed persistence. And God was convinced that some of the worst leaders had the most persistence. Then, of course, God had an idea that was the very best patience test of all. God caused a bush to start burning in the desert just near where some shepherds were pasturing their flock. A few shepherds passed it by and walked away. They didn't even notice that the bush was burning, but not burning up. Bushes are not special, and bushes on fire are not special, so nobody took the time to sit long enough to watch the miracle happen. Moses, who had run away from the palace and become a shepherd, saw the bush and sat down on the ground and watched. Moses watched and saw the bush's leaves were burned off and the bush's branches were black, just like ordinary burning bush. But the only thing different about this burning bush was that the bush did not burn up. It just continued to burn, and the branches never fell down into a heap, and the fire never went out. And Moses was the only one who waited long enough to notice. Moses tried to get the other shepherds to come and notice. When he tried to get them to come over and watch the bush burn with him, but they all had better things to do. Moses also had better things to do, but he did not know it at the time. The next one is called the Dolphins of the Red Sea. When the children of Israel had escaped from Egypt, they found the dolphins of the Red Sea waiting for them, chirping happy dolphin chirping sounds and splashing in the blue waters of the Red Sea with their flat tails. Suddenly, the people heard the terrible sounds of Pharaoh's great army chasing them from Egypt. Long spears clanking, horses' hooves pounding on the dry earth as they pulled war chariots. "We're trapped," they cried. "If we go back to Egypt, Pharaoh and his army will kill us. And if we go forward, we'll drown in the Red Sea." But Moses raised his arm, and God zipped the Red Sea right down the middle. The sight of the Red Sea split in half was amazing and confusing to the children of Israel. But can you imagine just how amazing and confusing this was for the fish of the Red Sea? A Red Sea fish would be swimming along, minding his own or her own fish business, when suddenly it would be swimming in midair, which is nowhere if you're a fish. The dolphins tried to warn their friends, the fish. They swam quickly along the edge of the walls of the water, chirping and warning the fish, "Don't go there." But the fish would ask, "What do you mean, don't go there? Where is there?" And the dolphin would answer, "There is the air." And the fish would say, "Huh? We don't see any air there." And by that time, the conversation would be over because the fish were already there in the air, which is nowhere if you're a fish. And fish in the air was not the only problem the dolphins of the Red Sea had to face. The children of Israel left Egypt with some flocks of sheep and goats and a few cows. And on their way across the Red Sea, some of those flocks walked right through the walls of the water and right to the bottom of the Red Sea, which is nowhere if you're a sheep or a goat or a cow. So the dolphins would quickly swim down to the bottom of the Red Sea and shoo the sheep and goad the goats and carry the cows back to the air, which is somewhere if you're a cow or a sheep or a goat. As if fish in the air and sheep in the sea were not enough to handle, the dolphins saw the army of the great Pharaoh was gaining on the children of Israel. The dolphins tried to slow down Pharaoh's army by flicking their tails through the waters of water and showering the wheels of the Pharaoh's war chariots so they stuck in the mud. When the walls of water came crashing together, the children of Israel were happy because they were free at last. The fish of the Red Sea were happy because there was no air near there. And the sheep and the goats and cows were happy because there was no Red Sea anywhere near there. But most of all, the dolphins of the Red Sea were happy because they could go back to doing what they liked best, chirping their dolphin chirping sounds and splashing the blue waters of the Red Sea with their flat tails. The next one is called No More Miracles. God never liked miracles. They were too flashy. Usually they hurt people, and after the miracle was over, people wanted another one right away. Also, the people never really believed the miracles were coming from God. After every miracle, the people would come to Moses and say, "Thanks." And Moses would say, "Don't thank me, thank God. God's the miracle maker. I'm just the miracle bringer." But it didn't matter what Moses said. The people thought that he was the one making the miracles. After all, they could see Moses and they could not see God. They just thought that Moses was being modest. Moses tried everything to convince the people that it was God making the miracles. Once Moses hid under his bed before a miracle, but the people found him and said, "Moses, that was great how you did a miracle from under your bed." Another time when Moses knew a miracle was coming, he had someone tie him up and put a bag on his head. But after the miracle, the people rushed to Moses and asked him, "How did you do a miracle all tied up like that?" But God still gave Moses the power to do the miracles because God knew that miracles were the only thing that would convince Pharaoh to let the children of Israel go. The Pharaoh let the children of Israel leave Egypt, but they were stopped at the Red Sea. The people came to Moses and said, "No problem. All we need is one little miracle, Moses. We can get crossed right over there on the Red Sea." Moses told them again that it was God and not he who did the miracles. Meanwhile, the Pharaoh had changed his mind. It was storming down on the children of Israel. Moses asked God for a very big and very quick miracle, but God said, "Sorry, Moses, no more miracles." Moses was angry. "Why did you take us out of Egypt if you were just going to let Pharaoh kill us on the Red Sea?" So God gave Moses a very big miracle and split the Red Sea. On the other side of the Red Sea, the children of Israel said, "Thanks, Moses. That was a great miracle." And Moses says, "Don't thank me. Thank God. God is the miracle maker. I'm just a miracle bringer." Then God told Moses, "That's it. No more miracles." A few days later in the desert, the children of Israel had run out of water and food and were yelling at Moses to get another miracle from God. Moses appeared before God and said, "I'm really sorry to bother you again, but I don't know what you had in mind here. There's almost 1 million people wandering around with no food, no water." So God sent food from the sky and water from the ground, and people said, "Thanks, Moses." And Moses said, "Don't thank me. Thank God. God is the one who makes the miracles. I just bring the miracles." God said, "That's it, Moses. No more miracles." The children of Israel needed hundreds of other miracles to get through the desert and to get to the land of Israel. And after every miracle, they would thank Moses, and Moses would say, "Don't thank me, thank God." And God would say, "That's it, Moses. No more miracles." After Moses died many years and many miracles later, Joshua was chosen to lead the people out of the desert and into the land of Israel. Joshua also asked God to do some miracles to make getting into the land of Israel a little easier for the children of Israel. At first, God said to Joshua, "No." But he begged God, saying, "Let me do a miracle, and then people will see that it was you all along and not Moses who did the miracle." So God gave in and did a miracle through Joshua for the people. When it was over, the people rushed up to Joshua and said, "Great miracle, Joshua. You're just about as good a miracle maker as Moses." Have you thought of questions about that story? I'm wondering how God gets the credit for any miracle God does, because we always want to give somebody credit, don't we? I know there's a million other questions in there, but that's a good one. Maybe there's others, a lot of others. The next one is called Coming Home. After wandering through the desert for 40 years, the children of Israel looked pretty bad. You could see the bones of their children right through their skin, and most of the cows and sheep and goats were so dried up they couldn't give any milk. At least the people didn't starve to death in the desert because of the food God sent for them, which was called manna. Manna collected on the plants in the morning, and it looked like grass seed, but tasted just a little better than sand. If you mushed it up with some water and baked it, it tasted a little like bread. Now, Joshua, the servant of Moses, had been told that the land of Israel was flowing with milk and honey. Moses had told him what God had told him, and God had told Moses. At night, around the campfire, Joshua would tell the children of Israel stories about the land of milk and honey. When he told them about the milk and honey, all the starving kids could think about were drinking some of that milk and eating some of that honey. When someone would find a honeycomb in the desert, every boy or girl in the camp would line up to get a tiny piece. They would lick their fingers all day, even after the honey had all been licked off, just to try to remember the taste. On the night before entering the land of Israel, Joshua had to face the fact that he didn't know really where to find the milk or where to find the honey. He was afraid to tell the children because they were so hungry. The day the children of Israel entered the land of Israel, people were crying and singing for joy, and the children ran over to the Jordan River yelling, "It's the milk river!" And they all dove in with huge mouthfuls of water. They cried, "This river is made of water." The children of Israel saw the mountain up ahead, and they cried out, "It's a honey mountain!" And they grabbed up handfuls of the mountain and stuffed it in their mouth. They cried, "This mountain is made of dirt." That night, the children of Israel camped inside the land of Israel, near the river Jordan and near the mountains of Moab. And Moses had to say goodbye to them. The flocks were happy and well fed, and on the green grass that grew near the river. The families were dancing and singing for joy. Everyone felt happy to be coming home to the land that was promised to their mothers and fathers. Joshua called together all the kids at the top of the little hill near the camp and said to them, "I want to tell you that I'm sorry. I don't know where to find the milk, and I don't know where to find the honey, but at least we are free and we are together and we are home at last." And they all looked up, and in the light of the setting sun, the river looked milky white, and the mountains of Moab looked honey yellow. The next day, the children found many large honeycombs in the trees near the river, and they ate and ate until nobody wanted any more. And on that day, the goats and sheep and cows gave milk again, and they gave so much milk that everybody drank until they could not drink any more. Joshua led the people deeper in the land, but the children of Israel left behind a pile of rocks and a little jar of goat's milk and a piece of honeycomb with a note, "To God, from all the kids, thank you for this place." This one is called The Announcing Tool. A long time ago, when all the people lived in one place, getting the news was easy. They had yellers then who would walk around the town. After a few minutes of yelling, everybody got the news. But when people began to live all over the place, even the yellers couldn't yell loud enough to get the news around. Mostly, people just didn't get the news. But some special times just had to be announced, and the arrival of a new year was one of those times. So God asked Enoch to go and find an announcing tool. The next day, Enoch returned with 2 rocks. "God, listen to my fine announcing tool," said Enoch, and he banged 2 rocks together, making a loud rock banging sound. God said to Enoch, "What kind of announcing tool is this to tell of the arrival of the new year? Rocks don't make music. They only make noise. The new year is a time for music and singing, not banging and yelling." Enoch ran off to find another announcing tool. The next day, Enoch returned with a gong. "Listen to this one," Enoch said as the gong made a gong, making lots of gonging sounds until God said, "Stop! What kind of announcing tool is this to announce the arrival of a new year? The gong does make a strong sound, but the gong is made of iron, and iron is used to make swords and spears and arrows and other weapons of war. The new year is to be a time of peace, not war." So Enoch ran off to find another announcing tool. The next day, Enoch returned to the harp. "God, this one is a winner." He strummed some lovely harp chords that filled the air. "Close, God," said God, "very close, but not close enough. The harp is a lovely instrument, but it's not noisy. It's not made of iron, but it's too soft and fine for an announcing tool. The next year has to be a time of loud rejoicing. We need an announcing tool that will carry the news from hilltop to hilltop around the world. Try again." The next day, Enoch returned with a golden trumpet in his hand and announced to God, "What you see here, God, is the perfect announcing tool. It makes music, not noise. It's not made of iron. It's loud enough to carry the news of the new year from hilltop to hilltop." Enoch then blew some fine notes on the golden trumpet, and God said, "The golden trumpet is a good announcing tool." Enoch jumped up and down with joy until God continued, "Good, but not good enough. The golden trumpet makes a loud, beautiful music and is not made of iron, but It is made by somebody who pounded it and rolled it and shaped it. I want a natural announcing tool that's not shaped by people. I want an announcing tool that's not made of gold. Prices are going up. Nobody could afford such an announcing tool. Enoch was getting depressed, but he ran off one more time to hunt down another announcing tool. The next day, Enoch was a little late coming back to God. When he did arrive, he was out of breath. I'm embarrassed, God, to show you my new announcing tool. It's only a ram's horn, not nearly as sweet as the harp or as beautiful as the golden trumpet, but it's not made of iron, and nobody pounded it or shaped it, except the ram. And I even think it's loud enough to get the news from hilltop to hilltop. But I'm not sure if it's a good enough announcing tool. Why are you not sure? Asked God. Well, Enoch replied, you see, O Holy One, blessed be you. I've been practicing with this all morning, and it's ever so hard to blow. Sometimes I blow, and all I get is a peep or a pfft or a and God spoke to Enoch with great love. Enoch, you have done well. The ram's horn is the perfect announcing tool. It is natural and loud and can make beautiful sounds. I know it's hard to play, but that is just right. The new year is hard too. It is a time for deciding to do good things and to give up bad things. The new year is a time for apologizing to others for hurting them in any way. And that's a very, very hard thing to do, even harder than blowing on a ram's horn. Then God sat Enoch down and taught him how to blow the ram's horn for the big celebration of the new year that was soon to begin. By the end of one lesson from God, Enoch could blow the ram's horn without a piff, a puff, or a squeak. And that is the end. The end of Does God Have a Big Toe? All of these stories are not stories from the Bible. They're stories to get you to think about the stories in the Bible. Isn't it more fun when you have questions and you go read a story rather than to just read the story in the Bible and go, why is that even there? This is to help you do that and to whet your appetite. One of the things that I learned growing up was I learned the most when I asked the best questions. I used to ask so many questions, I would drive my Sunday school teachers crazy. I remember one time, your grandmother, my mother, was the secretary for the Sunday school. And she was the one who tried to recruit teachers to teach each of the grade levels. And she came home one day and she goes, I have to tell you, Lois, you ask so many questions. Most people just read the little quarterly they had, the little magazine about the scripture that we were supposed to study. Most people just read that and they just go on. But you always ask questions. And so I've had teachers that have come and said, we'll teach any class except Lois's. I want you to know that's how I learned scripture. And that's how I want you to learn. I don't want you just to read it. I want you to learn it. I want you to ask good questions about it and to know more about God, because you didn't just read it. You asked good questions. I hope this helped you to do that. Thank you for spending the time with me to do that. And I look forward to even more of your questions. Keep learning.